Hey guys, welcome back to Eversoul. In today's video, we're checking out a mid-game tier list, which covers everything up to the current campaign in the game currently. Now, there's a few things I want to say before we get into it. Firstly, please just click the link to Pridewin, go to the website, just let it show in their analytics. I know I say this a couple times, but I really want to help support them because they do support the community so well, and I am just bringing to you some of the work. Now, I have very slight input into this, and Antilla is the one who puts in all the legwork into communicating with all the different players and the different whales in the game who are pushing it to find out what we have. Now, the next thing I want to say is if you're not interested in all these tier lists and stuff, because I know we're going through a fair few of them, that's fine. I'm trying to do at least 2 videos a day to give you guys something else to look at as well. But I just figure for those that are interested, these games evolve, like I've said before, so quickly from early to mid to late game. And then as new characters come in, new people find stuff. This isn't going to be exact. Like someone could find a strategy that none of the players have thought of yet, and it could dominate. But I'm just trying to give you guys the most up-to-date information that we can see from what people have that is working at high deficits so that you guys have the information. So once again, this tier list for mid-game is very much no input from me. This is all the players, the spenders who have pushed much further. So we'll look at it in a sec. Just the disclaimers here. Now, if you go to Pridewin and you want to check the early game tier list, they've also updated the early game tier list to represent more of what the community's felt and what more people have tested. So you can check that one out as well. Early game going to be chapter 1 to 9. Mid game is going to be chapter 10 to 15. Now, why is this mid game when it takes us to the end of the current campaign? Basically, these type of games, they've got to keep continually adding more chapters. I'm pretty sure in the next update we'll probably get more chapters again. So, you know, that's sort of where we're at. Now, he says here that some of the players have cleared chapter 15 using characters at level like 161, I believe it is. Yeah. But they're highly ascended. So from most free to play, you'll probably be 180 to 200 to get there. And that's just going to be the way it is. Now, this also, when you look at the deficit that you're pushing at, these guys are pushing at a deficit of, I think it was like 50 to 80% he wrote here. And that's pretty decent for a deficit to be pushing. If I can find it, yeah, up here, 50 to 80%. So if your power is 100k, you're defeating enemies at 180k to 150 to 180k. That's basically what that means. That's how you sort of gauge the quality. But if you're a casual player, you can play with whatever you want, and if you don't care about pushing deficits, it's fine. So I think that's all the disclaimers out of the way. So let's take a look at this tier list and see how it really does differ from what the early game was like. So the triple S tier. Now, these are units that are going to be pretty much the core of most teams. And I will do like a team composition type video. But this one here, when we look at Adrienne or Angel, she doesn't work unless you have the Ascension. So this is more of a speculative play from the players. From what I've heard around chapter 13 to 14, they all started dropping Angel out of the team because she wasn't effective enough. But if she was high Ascension, she would dominate. But because they only had an Elite or an Elite Plus copy of her, then it shifts to Claire being that replacement for that slot. Then we have Catherine. Catherine's always going to be good at high deficits, in my opinion. Invincibility, you just can't shake it. Then we have Naya, who's taking over as the primary DPS option because she's got that additional control and she just starts to scale a lot better. And then obviously we have Talia, who's fantastic for same as what she was in the early game, but she's no longer there for the damage. You're not going to be using her ult as much. There might be situations, but it's more for her basic energy generation and also a little bit of healing. Then we go into the SS tier. Now, Chloe's just absolutely fantastic. The taunt, the survivability that she brings when you start pushing high deficits, you know, you want to mitigate as much damage from the rest of your team as you can. She's fantastic for that. Then we go to Claire. Like I said, Claire's sort of replacing where Angel was because you can get her higher ascended easier, and she's just super tanky. She lunges into their row, and then she sort of just grabs a bunch of that aggro. So between a Claire and a Chloe, you can really absorb the aggro that the enemy team's trying to put out, unless they're rogues or something like that. Then we have Mephi. Now, Mephi is in here because she's a great secondary DPS. She provides your allies to she puts a debuff on the enemies that makes them get crit more and also reduces their defense with her artifact. She also does deal some really nice damage, plus a lot of these players had her from the banner highly ascended, so she's going to deal extra damage for them as well. But she also has a lockout for an enemy unit. And then we have Vivian dropping down. The Vivian nerf it definitely is felt more in the early game than the late game. Because in the late game, I feel like you're not using the Vivian ult as much because she wasn't just boarding enemy teams. So she's more there in the late game for her speed or haste buff. So she's sort of still relevant, even though she did get the nerf in that one. Then we go on to things like Clara. Clara is there to counter enemy angels. I'll do a whole video on that in the future, but she is amazing for that. Also, she's a pretty chunky healer, kind of like Prim. Prim's a good chunky burst healer, because up here in the other healers that we have, the other support units, Catherine's more of a shielding invincibility unit. Her heals are more slow and not as fast. So once we get into the actual like more effective healing healers, that's when we come into these two. Like I said, invincibility is huge, and so is energy generation. So that's Prim and Clara. Then we have arguably the most effective assassin. Jacqueline can be used to counter certain enemies because she does stun at the very start with her lunge, and it can interrupt some plays. And then obviously we have Petra. Petra falls off at this stage. She just doesn't bring enough support. She does have those shields. In the early game, she's absolute god tier because she can just soak up any amount of enemies, and then you can bring whatever DPS you want in the back row and just be fine. But she loses the utility for the team past that point. So that's why she does fall off in this stage of the game. And then we have Miriam coming up. Once again, this tier list was not made by me. I haven't used Miriam. I'm tipping it's just really good focused single target damage is where she shines for that one. Then as we go down into the A tier. We got Iris still hanging in at an A tier on this one. Now, the Korean tier list put her really low. I still think she's quite effective. I really like Ira. I just really like her design and stuff like that. But, you know, I'm definitely keen to test her more myself as we go on. Then we jump into Ayame. I think Ayame is just going to keep getting better the higher deficits players can push because of that charm that just buffs the enemy and just makes them an absolute savage for dealing damage. Then we have Dora, who sort of falls off because the damage at high deficits gets too high and she does become vulnerable there. Haru does provide, at this stage, she will start providing a heal block. So because at 161, I believe it is, she gets the heal block on her abilities. So she's going to be fantastic for that heal block sub-in type point. Jade, we all know what Jade does by now. She has a massive ult, but that big chunky damage isn't as high when you're playing at high deficits. So you're playing more for the control and the sleep and stuff like that. She does also have the charm, but the unfortunate thing about Jade as a secondary DPS is she doesn't provide as much to the team as Mephi does. And that's why Mephi's up here and Jade is down there. Then we've got Lindsay, who's like the second best assassin at this stage of the game. So, you know, she's there as an option if you don't have Jacqueline, because Jacqueline is a little bit more effective because she lunges at the very start, whereas we do take a while to get Lindsay over there. And then we have my girl, Nicole, my favorite character in the game. Good to see she's up there. Tipping is just for the raw damage, kind of like what Miriam's in there for. And some people may be getting some niche use in certain situations out of that. Then we jump down to the B tier. Mika and Siha, who I really like in the early game, fall off a little bit. I do believe these two will have value later on as we can find more comps. Just that's my personal vibe. Just because Mika has some nice control. She has stun on her main skill. She has stun on her ult. She's just got some good CC and those durations go up. So I feel like her and a CC comp could eventually become a thing, especially if beasts become more relevant and have more support. So we'll have to wait and see. Then we have Rebecca. Rebecca, I think the reason for being down here is she falls off as the heal blocker because we get Haru, who's just a better option in my opinion. And that would be my assumption there. Then we jump into Siha, like I said, mentioned it's just Mika Siha combo if you want to use. Suni, I haven't used too much. She's fairly tanky. She's got some damage. I just don't think she provides enough to the team as the rest of these tanks up here do. And then we drop down into the C tier. Now keep in mind, like I said, this is a small sample size that this tier list is coming from. It's just the most up-to-date information we have on what people are actually clearing the game with. So these units definitely could be viable in the future. I'm not going to go in depth into them because I haven't got too much success with them myself, but Renee is definitely one I want to test more. But the problem with Dodge is Dodge starts to fall off the higher the deficit you push. So we'll have to see how all of these guys work. But remember, there is going to be other formats in the game. There's going to be endgame PvP. There's going to be bosses coming out. We've got the guild bosses coming and all that stuff to look at. But that is going to be the tier list. Like I said, something like Angel, I just wanted to touch on again, because if you do have one copy of her, I'd be interested to see where she would fall. Because at the moment, she does sort of just get phased out by not having Ascension. However, keeping in mind, this is Wales that sort of pushing to this point. So if you're more free-to-play player, by the time you get to this point, she could still be valuable at 1 copy. I'm still using her at 1 copy halfway through chapter 10 on my account, so we'll have to see how that goes. But anyway, guys, that is going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.